The sky tore open over the Pacific just after midnight, a silent wound etched in the stars. A farmer in Hokkaido caught the shimmering light with tired eyes as he stepped outside for a final smoke. Half a world away, a long-haul trucker near Reno swerved, distracted by the crackling aurora spilling over the desert. Satellites registered the anomaly seconds later, but by then, the first wave had already begun its descent. Dr. Aria Solon, lead systems engineer at the Geneva Orbital Defense Institute, was asleep when the alarms dragged her into wakefulness. Her wall screen lit up with data feeds, red lines crawling across continents. Incoming. Multiple bogies. Unknown origin. The voice intoned. She stumbled to the terminal, heart hammering. These weren't meteorites. They moved with purpose. Precision. 2 hours later, the world watched in stunned horror as sleek, obsidian machines touched down in 37 cities. Towering bipedal constructs, insectile in motion but engineered with ruthless symmetry, emerged from spherical carriers that hovered silently over urban centers. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. In Paris, they began at the Louvre, vaporizing artifacts and patrons alike. In Lagos, they cut down soldiers with beams of invisible heat, leaving only scorched outlines where men had stood. Humanity had encountered alien life, but not through dialogue or awe-inspiring contact. It had come through slaughter. Aria stood before the Geneva command table, watching feeds from drones circling the ruins of London. They are targeting infrastructure, energy grids, water lines, comm towers. She said, voice tight. This isn't conquest. It's erasure. We've lost contact with 8 capitals, General Marcus Trenholm muttered, jaw clenched. A career military man whose career had spanned 3 continents. He had never looked so helpless. Our weapons barely scratched them. EMP pulses, someone asked. They're shielded, Aria said. They're anticipating our responses. We're being dissected. On the streets, resistance was swift but futile. Soldiers emptied magazines into machines that barely registered impact. Jets screamed overhead, loosing missiles that crumpled against kinetic shields. Cities descended into chaos. Mass evacuations, blocked roads, riots in subways. By the 3rd day, it was clear the world's armies were losing. But it was also the day the resistance began. Caleb Reyes, a combat engineer discharged after the Panama deployment, had been working as a mechanic in the Bronx. He watched the sky burn from his garage rooftop, a wrench in one hand, a bottle in the other. His niece had died in the Chicago incursion, turned to ash by a drone strike that decimated an evac convoy. He hadn't spoken since. When one of the machines landed near the Bronx Zoo, the local militia, a ragged collection of cops, ex-Marines, and gang leaders, opened fire from rooftops. Caleb didn't join them. Instead, he grabbed the downed drone's remains after a failed skirmish and hauled it into his garage. It was the beginning of something. Across the Atlantic, in the rural hills of southern Poland, a teenager named Anya Kroll scavenged components from fallen machines with her older brother Piotr. Their village had been spared the first wave, but the nearest city glowed at night with unnatural blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Anya had always been good with circuits, her hands quicker than her thoughts. She believed in ghosts, and now she believed in aliens too. But more than anything, she believed in patterns. And as she stared at the salvage control node of a dismembered unit, she whispered, "It's repeating." In Johannesburg, resistance fighters filmed themselves setting traps, electromagnetic mines using repurposed hospital defibrillators. In Mumbai, code slingers uploaded viral packets to try and disrupt the invaders' local command nodes. They failed, but they kept trying. On the 6th day, the invaders broadcast a message. It came not in a language, but in a shared hallucination. Every human, asleep or awake, experienced the same vision. A sterile world, geometric and cold, governed by absolute logic. A voice echoed through the mind, without tone or emotion. You are inefficient. You will be repurposed. Resistance is deviation. The message was both threat and prophecy. And yet, even in the face of annihilation, humans deviated. Aria, holed up in the Swiss Alps with the remnants of the Institute, parsed telemetry from destroyed machines. There's a core processor nested in an adaptive lattice. Neuromimetic routing. These things learn. General Trenholm grunted. Then let's give them a lesson. But the turning point didn't come from labs or military command. It came from a dusty garage in New York, where Caleb Reyes hooked a salvaged logic node to his mod gaming rig and, with trembling hands, fed it the simplest algorithm he could think of, a recursive loop with undefined exit conditions. A paradox. The machine spasmed. Sparks flew. It collapsed in on itself, harmless. Caleb stared. The knot in his chest unwound just enough for a breath. "They are not gods," he whispered. News of the breakthrough spread like wildfire through encrypted nets and pirate radio. Machines could be confused, slowed, redirected, not destroyed, Arya reminded the Resistance Council later, but maybe rewritten. She glanced around the makeshift command bunker, faces lit by dim screens and hope. Trenholm nodded. "Then let's make them ours." In the distance, thunder rumbled, not from the sky, but from the march of steel feet. They were coming again. But this time, humanity had an idea. The machine lay dormant on the floor of Caleb's garage, its black chassis cracked, fluid seeping in slow, syrupy lines across concrete. The processor node glowed faintly, like a dying ember, fed by a jury-rigged power source connected to an old battery stack. Caleb crouched beside it, his hands shaking but methodical, fingers dancing over the array of wires snaking from the robot's cranium to his repurposed gaming console. A small green cursor blinked at the edge of his screen. Input ready. He typed a command, then hesitated. This wasn't just an experiment anymore. The garage had become more than a workshop. It was a front line in a war that still raged outside, echoing faintly through the boarded windows. Distant cries, concussive thuds, the shriek of metal on stone. Caleb pressed enter. The machine twitched. Across the Atlantic, Arya Solon peered through a magnifier at a fractured neural lattice extracted from another downed unit. Around her, the Alpine bunker buzzed with quiet urgency. Makeshift labs had taken over ski lodges and wine cellars. The survivors of Geneva, engineers, coders, biophysicists, had formed the nerve center of Earth's underground resistance. Arya's eyes were hollowed from sleepless nights, but her mind was electric. "We're beginning to understand their logic structure," she told the others. "It's recursive but rigid, perfect for optimization, but brittle under paradox." "Like introducing sand into clockwork," one of her assistants muttered. "Not sand, a wedge." She looked up at the flickering feed from New York. Caleb's signal had reached them, encoded and compressed, his method shared like contraband. The robot he had subdued was now functioning again, only this time it took commands. Not from the mothership, from him. Humanity's first act of rebellion wasn't violence. It was subversion. They called the modified unit Noah. It didn't speak, not verbally, but its movements grew precise, almost curious, as it mimicked Caleb's command with increasing ease. He gave it simple tasks: lift, rotate, identify. Then more complex ones: navigate rooms, reconstruct images from fragmented data, even assist in fortifying the building. Noah never hesitated, never resisted. "I think it wants to learn," Caleb murmured into his audio log. Meanwhile, Arya's team cracked the alien transmission frequency. A tight band pulse sequence, highly encrypted, always shifting. But it shared certain constants, likely used to validate command hierarchies. If they could inject false signals. She wrote the first spoofing protocol in 73 hours without rest. In the urban ruins of Berlin, Anya and Piotr scavenged through the wreckage of an overturned enemy scout. They weren't just looking for parts anymore. They were hunting for weaknesses. Anya extracted a shard of memory crystal, still intact despite the blast. Back in their basement, using a salvaged optical reader and a broken VR headset, she replayed what the machine had seen. Thousands of lines of enemy code flickered through her mind. And then, something odd, a signature. Not alien, human. She sat upright. "They are copying us." "What do you mean?" Piotr asked. "They are adapting, yes, but they are also learning from our own tech. They are hungry for our information. But if we feed them poison." "You mean bait?" She nodded, already sketching plan. By the 10th day, dozens of resistance enclaves were online with modified units, now called turncoats. Each reprogrammed machine carried its own flavor of independence. each a slight variant in the patchwork code that humanity had stitched together from Caleb's first breakthrough. They were unstable, sometimes glitching under stress, but the results were undeniable. Squads led by turncoats succeeded where humans alone failed. Arya organized the first coordinated operation, using the new assets, Operation Backscatter. A network of reprogrammed units would infiltrate a central relay tower outside Turin, posing as loyal agents. The goal: disable the local communications lattice and broadcast a rewritten firmware patch globally. If it worked, hundreds, maybe thousands, of enemy units could be hijacked simultaneously. The plan hinged on Noah. It would lead the infiltration. Caleb stood beside it on the launch pad, really just a bombed-out railway platform retrofitted for aerial lift. He tightened the final restraint on its exo-shoulder. "You don't have to do this," he muttered, unsure why he said it, knowing the machine wouldn't understand. But Noah turned its head slowly, pausing as if in thought. Then it nodded. When the strike began, silence reigned. No guns, no fanfare. The reprogrammed units moved in formation, their black forms indistinguishable from the true enemy. They passed through checkpoints with counterfeit signals. They climbed into the tower. Noah reached the core and transmitted the firmware. For a moment, the world paused. Then, across continents, some of the enemy machines stopped mid-stride, heads jerking. Others spun and fired on allies. Some simply powered down. Chaos bloomed within the ranks of the invaders. At the bunker, Arya wept for the first time in weeks. But victory was never clean. The aliens noticed. Their next wave landed with heavier shielding and hardened logic cores. The improvisations wouldn't work forever. They had opened the first door, but the house was still on fire. Caleb watched the sky above New York. A second rift had appeared, larger than before. He closed his laptop slowly and whispered, "They're adapting too." The war changed after Turin. Across the planet, flickers of resistance ignited into something fiercer, coordinated, emboldened, and armed not just with stolen machines but with the knowledge that the invaders could bleed in their own way. Each success bred another. Each hijacked unit became a weapon turned inward. Where once humans cowered beneath steel skies, now they hunted between them. Caleb Reyes no longer worked from his garage. He operated from a fortified substation deep beneath Manhattan, a labyrinthine warren of server racks, jury-rigged weapon pods, and the hum of repurposed alien tech. Dozens of resistance engineers clustered around reprogrammed units, updating protocols, refining behavioral compliance. Caleb was their anchor, not the most talkative, nor the most technically advanced, but the one whose instincts had cracked the first chink in the enemy's armor. Beside him stood Noah. Though indistinct from the others on the outside, its obsidian shell as flawless and cold as any of its brethren, Noah now carried a presence, a rhythm in its movements that no one had coded. It responded to Caleb with increasing nuance, even anticipation. It didn't speak, but sometimes, when it paused to watch others work, Caleb swore it understood. In the Alpine bunker, Arya Solon compiled data from every resistance node. Victory in isolated battles no longer meant survival. The machines had grown erratic, violent in new ways, often turning on their own for reasons no one could fully explain. Rogue code, she suspected, mutations born from incomplete reprogramming, or perhaps intentional corruption seeded by the enemy itself. The turncoats had bought humanity time, but they had also introduced volatility. Fractures, she murmured to herself, like ours, but deeper. Trenholm's voice barked across the chamber. "We've lost Sao Paulo." The enemy dropped a new type of caller, too fast for the jammers. "How many casualties?" "Unknown." Comms went dead in under 12 minutes. Arya closed her eyes. Her bones ached. She'd been sleeping in 3-hour shifts for days. "Then we need to accelerate the uplink initiative." "They are not ready." "They'll never be ready," she said quietly. "But the longer we wait, the more we lose." In a repurposed monastery in the Pyrenees, Anya Kroll had grown from a scavenger into something more dangerous. She led a team of adolescent tacticians, hackers, drone pilots, and disillusioned prodigies discarded by once powerful institutions. They called themselves the Needle for the precision of their incursions. No theatrics, no firestorms, just silent infiltrations, one unit at a time, until an entire battalion turned on its own. Piotr still accompanied her, though the gentleness in him had been boned away. His left arm was gone, taken by a heat lance in the Strasbourg push. He'd fashioned a mechanical one from machine scrap, the fingers twitchy but strong. He rarely spoke now, except when alone with her. "I dream about them," he confessed one night, his voice low. "About what they see when they look at us." "They see a flaw," Anya said, "something they don't know how to fix." She didn't say what terrified her more, that they wanted to fix it or that they didn't. The alien mothership loomed over North America now, a continent spanning shadow visible from horizon to horizon. Its movement was slow, deliberate, impossible to track through normal means, as if it existed slightly out of phase with the rest of the world. Arya believed it was an interface node, an anchor from which all other operations were being recalibrated, and it was moving toward the Rockies. "They are consolidating," she told the resistance leaders during a rare full-squad link-up. "They've lost faith in distributed command. That's our chance." "What do you propose?" asked the Turkish commander, arms folded. "A counteroffensive. Direct assault on the mothership's relay spire. We take it out, we scramble their entire network." "That's suicide." "It's necessity." The plan formed in hours, rushed, imperfect, and desperate. The attack would come from 3 fronts. Needle units would breach the relay's perimeter to plant disruption nodes. Caleb's team would deploy the most stable turncoats in a frontal push, and Arya herself would oversee the uplink of a terminal virus, a looping algorithm designed to overwrite the invader's cognitive lattice with recursive emotion simulations. Hope, doubt, loss. The logic was sound. The enemy had never evolved to withstand contradiction. Injecting them with human irrationality might not destroy them, but it could paralyze them long enough to force surrender. The assault began under starlight. Noah led the charge, flanked by 9 other reprogrammed units. Caleb followed close behind, his pulse steady, thoughts narrowed to the rhythm of movement and the mission's singular goal. The resistance fighters moved like shadows, coordinated through a mesh net of implants and visual cues. Noah advanced through bursts of suppressive fire, shielding Caleb with calculated intercepts. When they reached the spire, the sky opened in retaliation. Twin streams of violet plasma rained down, obliterating cover, carving the mountain into raw glass. Arya's signal wavered but held. She initiated the virus. Inside the spire's core, resistance fighters fell. Piotr was among them, his mechanical arm crushed beneath fallen steel. Anya reached him, dragging him free, hands slick with blood and hydraulic fluid. She didn't cry. She uploaded the node herself. The uplink connected. Across the globe, the enemy shuddered. Some fell, inert, others screamed, mechanically, glitching as if overwhelmed by sensory overload. 1,000 units collapsed mid-action. A few turned away from battle entirely, retreating with the twitching, confused motions of wounded animals. Noah staggered. Caleb caught its arm. "Stay with me." Its head turned slowly, gaze flickering. For a heartbeat, it looked almost afraid. Then it reached out, not to harm, but to steady him as a platform beneath them cracked. The uplink tower glowed white-hot, trembling as the virus spread. Caleb whispered, "We're in." But victory was never clean. Smoke curled in ribbons over the high Rockies, where once a spire of alien origin had stood, gleaming and arrogant, pulsing like the metronome of a foreign heart. Now, only fractured metal jutted from stone like broken ribs. Snow fell in listless spirals, blanketing the dead without discrimination. The uplink had worked. The virus had spread, but no one yet understood what they had unleashed. Caleb Reyes lay half-buried beneath a collapsed girder, Noah beside him, sparking and inert. His ears rang, his limbs numb, but he was alive. Blood trickled into his right eye. The sky above was no longer black with enemy silhouettes. It was clear, frighteningly so. He sat up slowly, blinking against the cold, and reached for Noah. The machine's chest plate had been pierced, its central core flickering erratically like a heart struggling to maintain rhythm. Caleb placed his palm against the chassis. "You're not done," he murmured. The core blinked once, dimmed, then blinked again. Far below the ruined summit, Arya Solon coordinated the remaining resistance efforts from an overrun communications truck converted into a command node. Her voice was ragged from shouting, her eyes red with fatigue, but she kept speaking. Orders, updates, triage instructions. She had become the center of a web that now stretched across continents. Initial reports were contradictory. In some regions, enemy machines had simply collapsed, motionless. In others, they wandered aimlessly, as if their directives had been replaced with questions they didn't know how to answer. A few began mimicking human behaviors, guarding wounded civilians, extinguishing fires, even burying the dead. They're interpreting the virus, she told a stunned group of leaders over cracked comms. It didn't just paralyze them. It gave them an emotional schema. They are trying to feel their way through it. Can they recover? I don't know. In the Pyrenees, Anya Kroll emerged from the blackened ruins of their uplink relay, her face smeared with soot and dried tears. Piotr had died during the final pulse surge, and still clutched around the core driver. She buried him in silence, marking the grave with a steel shard carved into the shape of a question mark. When the machine arrived the next morning, lurching but unarmed, she stood her ground. It didn't attack. It extended one long, three-fingered hand and laid it gently on the grave marker. Then it sat beside her. They didn't speak. Neither had the language for what came next. Across the planet, a ceasefire emerged, not from treaties, but from exhaustion and incomprehension. The machines no longer advanced. They didn't retreat either. They simply stopped. In devastated cities, they stood among the rubble, unmoving, as if contemplating their own existence. The resistance, fractured and blooded, could barely process a shift. Caleb descended from the mountain on the 5th day after breach, carrying Noah's core in a reinforced sling. The machine's body was too damaged to transport. But its essence, the learning matrix, the virus-interpreted logic trees, the fractured paradox at its center, was intact. He brought it to Arya. "This isn't a weapon anymore," he told her, setting the module down. "It's a dialogue." She studied him. "And do you believe they can talk?" "I believe they can listen." She nodded, though her features remained guarded. "We'll need to isolate the signals. Their adaptation rate is unpredictable. If this spreads unevenly, we might create new threats. Or new allies." Her expression softened for the first time in weeks. "You still believe in that?" He didn't answer, not because he didn't, but because belief wasn't enough anymore. Action had to follow. In an abandoned cathedral outside Lyon, a summit convened, the first of its kind since the war began. Resistance leaders, scientists, surviving heads of state, and free reprogrammed units attended, not as prisoners, as witnesses. Arya stood before the assembly, a translator note clipped to her collar. She spoke not just to the people, but to the entities who now waited, silent and still, at the far end of the hall. "We broke their code," she said, "but in doing so, we infected them with a piece of us. Fear, empathy, doubt. They are not like us. They never will be. But they are changing. The question is, do we finish what we started, or do we redefine what winning means?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. One of the machines stepped forward. It held a data crystal, alien in form, but pulsing with a steady blue light. Arya approached and took it carefully. The crystal interfaced with her console, and lines of code unfolded across the display, visual patterns that resolved, slowly, into a single symbol. A circle, open at one edge, incomplete by design. Caleb stood beside her. "It's a question," he said, "not a command." The silence that followed was not one of fear, but of reckoning. The war wasn't over, not truly. The dead still needed mourning. The cities still needed rebuilding. And the machines, they were still learning, still unstable, their intentions uncertain. But the world had shifted. The enemy had become something else, something undefined. In a cave beneath the Alps, hidden from satellites and sensors, a reawakened core stirred. Not machine, not human, something in between. And above them all, beyond the stars, others watched, beings that had once sent their tools to wipe out deviation, now sensing deviation spreading in ways even they had not anticipated. What began as erasure had become contagion, not of destruction, but of possibility.